Calvin,
Yo, what's up?
I don't know what we're going
What's
to
up?
talk about today. What are you playing?
Great.
What
What
games
am
are you
I
playing right
playing?
now? Like, because here's the thing, right? I bet you and I play very different games. And I bet you we probably play them for very different reasons these days, but it comes back to the puzzles and the patterns. Like, I'd say you've chewed up enough puzzle patterns, or you're seeking something interesting that not the average
Yeah.
gamer is really looking for these days.
Yeah, very much so. I think I'm kind of an extreme version of a indie gamer because at this point, I kind of mentioned it in the first podcast. I am specifically hunting new ideas, and that's not because I'm a game dev now. That is the path that I started to just fall down, like since the PS2 days, and then I started moving more towards indie games,
Right.
and then now I'm like a novelty fiend. It is like I'm like ravenous to see new ideas for both gaming and dev. So it's
Okay.
very extreme.
And all of that you're just finding through itch. Are you finding that through like Twitter? Like, I feel like these people who are doing these more novelty things are also really highly focused. Like, these are individuals. They're not groups of people, right? So, um, are they? Is it like consistent content? Like, what's going on here? Like, who is this little
You
community making these weird niche games, and why the hell are they doing it other than for the love of it, obviously?
That is a really great question. I actually don't know how I find these. They just like happen to stumble into my life basically. So I don't have a consistent thing. You would think any kind of good curator might have that, but no, I don't know. It's like I'm sure there's a lot of gems that just fall right past me.
There's so many, but that's just the thing, is that there are new games going up. I want to see the numbers. Like, does itch post any of those numbers of how many uploads go up a day, like a
No,
year in
not
review
that I
or
know.
something? Damn,
Not that I know of.
they really should, because like, I bet you they could make a really cool infograph that is like the growth of just the indie community by itself. Like, obviously they get all the jam traffic, and like, do you call jam games really a game? Sometimes they're really
It's
good,
like
but
yeah, in terms of the quality one, just like pure numbers wise, not dogging on Jam faithful, but it is probably 0.1% is like worth playing.
it's funny seeing some of those come in, and you're just like, how the fuck did you do that in fucking
Yeah,
48 hours? And like there was one, there was like a game about, it was rafts. You had like
yeah,
seven blocks that you would move around this
yep. I've
raft,
played it.
and if you get hit by the rock, then it would stop that raft, and it wouldn't move, and it would detach, and then you would lose that thing, and that was your platform. And I was like, where did this come from? Like, this is
Yeah,
perfect. Like, what the
and it was
hell?
also like it was like half a base building game too, so it really like shifted the quote base builder sort of idea
It's nice,
into
but
something new.
the thing that I'm getting, I'm trying to allude to is like, where do we find our organic traffic these days, right? So I guess like the majority of people are finding it through, Facebook used to be the big place where you would just like advertise for your games. And I don't feel like that's profitable at all if you're any sort of developer. Well, not any sort of developer. If you're still the commercial hit success, you gotta go and advert right to Facebook. Obviously, that's part of the Instagram traffic and whatever else networks that they have these days. But um, I feel like the places I find my stuff is like r slash indie gaming, or like r slash
Oh yeah.
like indie, where, I don't know, maybe that's because I'm just like a Reddit hole nerd, and I'll just sit there forever, and I don't have an Instagram account. Well, I do have an Instagram account, but I don't have a Twitter account. Okay, I have a Twitter account, but I don't use either of these two things at all. But like, is are there newer places where people are finding these things? Like, obviously it's got to be TikTok and stuff like that, but like, I don't know what TikTok marketing looks like for a video game these days, Is that like, this must be place things that people are doing, right?
Yeah, I've seen some successful ones on TikTok, and they do.
Do you TikTok?
Uh, I do not.
Okay.
I barely even see it. So if they've bubbled up into my feed, that means they probably hit mainstream. But yeah, I heard of some devs that do they put out their personality and they don't necessarily talk about their game that much. They do dance challenges and whatnot.
Oh, that
Yeah,
sucks. So they go
yeah, you
into the
bet.
zeitgeist because they want to get into the algorithm because
Yeah,
they can't just post their game, right? Like, even if they post it with like other people around or like playing or some pseudo third party thing where it's like people are enjoying it while they're watching it. Like, I don't know,
yeah,
like, but you won't get the eyeballs, right?
right.
So
So you better
you have to do the common thing and just start dancing.
gotta hone those dance moves if you want to be a game dev. Imagine telling somebody that 20 years ago. But
Jesus Christ, you heard it here first, folks. Get on stage.
yeah,
Don't actually make a game, just dance and post a picture of it or something like that. When you're making your newest character.
dude, that's exactly. And then text flies up. It's exactly what it
Top
looked like.
text, bottom text. Sick, dude. It's fucking
There you
stupid.
go. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we've all seen like examples of these new kinds of organic traffic. I don't have any numbers, and it'd be really interesting to see some of them.
Yeah, like we were talking about before we hit the record button, the fact that building a community around your product really does seem to be like one of the biggest levers of whether or not you're going to be quote unquote successful, whatever that means to you in any sort of sense. Yo, fucking GME is up 5.4%, baby. Let's go. Come
Man, I've been
on.
seeing some crazy numbers.
That was a
Is what for some reason this is very random, but
okay,
I was
big
looking.
topic switch. But
Yeah, we'll switch back. I saw VMware went up like 25 or 50%. Is like what? Like that's a big company. That's not a random company like GME.
did
So
they
it
announce some patent or
they
some new
they did it.
technology or
They
something
like
like that?
I think somebody was looking to buy them or so.
Ah, see that's yeah, there you go. Before the stock split. Okay.
Yeah.
What the hell was I talking about before?
I don't know. It was a good topic though. Let's get back to it.
Jesus Christ. Oh yeah, building community. So like
Yeah.
the reality is that building the product alone. And I've probably been harping on this point for too long now, but across a couple of different episodes. But building the product alone does not seem to be the key measurement of success. Yeah, you can make a cool game. Can you get it to the masses is the big problem. There's tons of different ways that you can kind of frame around that, like within your game and your structure of your multiplayer, like make it as open as possible, like maybe put it out for free, like figure out some option for that. But if you can get people to look at it and get your cost per install down or your cost per impression down, then theoretically you can have a better opening day. And that opening day booster will help you to get the wish list number that you really need to be able to get into any sort of Steam promotion, and to be able to leverage any of that too. And if you're trying to go to publishers these days, one of them is like, yeah, sure, you could, if you're in a tertiary market, like, sorry, Brazil, Portugal, Spain, anybody that's not the US, basically, like, yes, you can go to publishing. I've known a guy who went to a publishing company off of a strong social postings. So he was making small improvements on his game and on his gameplay, and then sold it off of just a combat GIF. Publishers reached out to him and was like, "Hey, like, what are you doing?" He had nothing. He had no money, no team. He was just doing this himself, but he was just putting these posts out, and the eyeballs get you those traffics. So in this new side of marketing, like, yeah, I want to know how well TikTok really is doing for indie developers, or is that now like the untapped place where we really do need to start framing up over there? Because there was a whole trend for so long, it's like come full circle now in mobile commercial gaming, where like all the 4X games were trying to get their ECPI, or like their evaluated cost per install. So it's like taking like the US dollar and then taking all of the other countries and what their LTVs are, and then like mapping the cost per install against like the equated version. That's anyway. I'm butchering the shit out of that, but the um Oh god, my brain. Calvin, help me, please.
Uh, well, I wanted to support what you're saying in a very fundamental sense to just kind of say like why this is so important. The meta has absolutely shifted. People, I mean, if you haven't already realized this, I mean, I'll just emphasize it here, which is that the cost to make games or the barrier to entry is very low,
Yeah.
and the markets are flooded. There's lots of markets, and everything is trying to grab your attention. We are just in a completely attention saturated market, and everything is fighting for your eyeballs. So the meta is no longer necessarily to make the best game, but you have to make something that can cut through all that noise and reach eyeballs. So whatever it takes, it could be TikTok, Discord. I mean, it seems like almost every game has a Discord now.
Yeah, which
Like you said,
doesn't seem to like necessarily work. Like we have a Discord too, but we've tried to direct traffic there. But if you don't have events and things going on and real deeper community there, like then yeah, like it's not gonna happen. It's just not. People aren't gonna stay. Like nobody's gonna sit in your random Discord. And to be honest, have you seen the Discord's UX? Like, look, I love it as a program. It's great. It's free. Blah blah blah. But like, trying to sift through that sidebar on the left to find any of the messages. I have
yeah,
hundreds of channels. Every one of them has like a red, pip badge on it with a number beside it, and I'm just like, how am I going to read any of these? Like, what am I
yeah,
actually? What's important here? Like, what do I actually care about, and how do I get to that information fast? And it's not there. But
totally.
yet what I was meaning to say before was exactly what you're saying. It's more the creative these days too, right? Like, last few years, commercial games have gone into this high idea of selling a game that doesn't exist. So like, they're doing CGI renders of their characters building things, right, like in the 4X space because they need to get the eyeballs, they need to get as many people in the funnel as possible. And then it became these things where the gameplay that they were showing didn't actually represent the game. So like Township, billion-dollar title, was showing off that pull the ring and save the person, this hero's story in a game about a metropolis and being a city builder in like this weird kind of not 4xy space. But um, after a while, because of some Apple guidelines, they put that gameplay into the game. So then it became this full circle thing now where it's like, oh, the new games that they were showing, this gameplay that didn't exist, became compelling. And players were like, no, 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 but I wanted to play that. So this whole bait and switch tactics then became, it's like, okay, well, now we'll actually put it in, but it's not really the game, and then we'll pull it back out and then put this back in. And it's like, and now those things, other creatives, are now real games. And then what does that say about the industry by itself? It's like, I don't want to play Township. I've played a city builder for the 100th time. I don't want to do that. I want to play the new thing, this new cool thing, this thing over here. But the industry didn't want to make it. But we got great numbers. Lowered our marketing budgets. I don't know, man.
There
Next level creative.
there is a game that yeah, there is a game that actually took that pull the ring mechanic and then turned it into a real game, and then they actually did quite well. But
I
yeah,
wouldn't doubt it.
like you said that
People are starving, and then all of a sudden it's like, here it is. Like, fuck, yeah, that's what I
exact
wanted.
it's like people companies have been doing this for a while, which is running, like you said, running ads to test the waters and see, all right, what theme is going to work the best with my audience and with my gameplay. So it is uh, I guess here's my opinion on it. It is definitely a way to get clicks. Like this is probably actually the one of the most compelling to click games, which is pulling the ring or whatever. But it doesn't necessarily translate to gameplay or retention. But if people want to move up their CPI numbers, then yeah,
We
it's
would
how
use
they've been
it
testing it.
as just water testing. So like once you have a game concept and idea, before you do anything, set a concept artist out to just like build you that 5 panel, register a Google Play account, and make a fake landing page. So upload everything. If you can put a trailer there, great, but like don't spend that much time on it. And then run ads on that page and try to sell your game. So you do it up as like a wish list. So then you try to see, okay, from the amount that I spend, how many impressions did I get, and then how many click through funnel did I get to actually download in air quotes the game, right? And that's like a great litmus test for, hey, new game ideas. Like, does this art style like work in test market? Does the idea make sense to the players, and can they get this concept like at a clip? And are they willing enough to actually go through that funnel and say like, hey, like I'm interested enough to say get me this game. And that can give you some good confidence, but anytime you put your ideas out there, these things can get snaked. And
Oh yeah.
how do we protect against this? Or do we just fundamentally just say it doesn't matter? Like it's
Well,
just
certainly,
time, because time to market is like the big thing.
yeah, certainly for the big companies like Supercell. I mean, they put out their ideas kind of early. Well, yeah, they their ideas out relatively early. They soft launch pretty early, but they're Supercell. It doesn't matter if somebody tries to take the idea and clone it. It's like good luck.
Yeah.
It's Supercell. But for a smaller dev, that's one of the big questions. And then one of the other big questions is what we were talking about earlier, which is how do you stand out? I think those are two huge questions regarding indie devs, and then you have to be super creative.
Yeah.
At this point, you really have to be really clever with how you do something like that. I'll give an example of uh, a company or group that attacked both.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there, so there's a company called Sock Pop. I'm not going to talk about Sock Pop, but I'm just going to give a background to them. Sock Pop is a group that had been around since maybe at least 6 years or so, but they are a group of four somewhat independent devs that um, they each take 2 months to make a game, but they stagger their releases so that they kick out a game every 2 weeks.
Huh.
So they have a
Okay.
Patreon. So they're basically like, here, hey, sign up for our Patreon, and you'll get a new game every 2 weeks because of their release model that they have. And they're usually pretty clever titles. But this model had been around for a while because of them. And I think they make like 5K a month. So not bad, not bad at all for a pretty innovative shtick. But I guess,
That would pay your house rent, if you had those four people together in
yeah,
your
yeah,
little home, like, or whatever, right? Like, but that's not it's nothing to sneeze about. It's pretty
yeah,
great.
absolutely. It's one of the better, like, totally indie grassroots things I've seen. But I was very interested because I saw another group do this model. So I'm starting to see it, actually get some foothold. Now, what these people did, so Ludum Dare,
Mm-hmm.
Ludum Dare is the one of the largest online and longest running game jams there is, where you make a game in a weekend.
Yeah. If you haven't done
And
one, do one. They're worth it. 50 was just a couple of weeks ago.
that's yeah, it was a little bit ago, not too long ago. But the one who won the last Ludum Dare, they made a game. It was a group very similar to Sock Pop. They made a game where you play chess, but your queen has a shotgun. No,
Was it
your
you,
king.
Colin? Was it you? Did you win it? Did you win it? Is this what the big announcement over here?
I will set it up next time if I
Fuck.
do
All right.
win. But yeah, you play as a king with a shotgun playing chess. Now this game won, but they immediately started work on a full version. They kicked it out and they basically funneled all that Ludum Dare traffic to their Discord and their Patreon. And
Right.
they're and I never heard of them before, but they did the same model, which is, hey, sign up for our Patreon, and we will kick out a new game for you like every 2 weeks or whatever, or every month. So I thought that was a really good success story because they have also been making like 3,000, 4,000 a month. And
That's
they're cutting through the
phenomenal.
noise. Yeah, cutting through the noise, and they to address the clone thing. Both Sock Pop and these people put their personalities forward. They're tying the face to the name.
Right.
They make
Okay.
they make videos all the time and stuff like that.
Dev updates? Is it all blog updates? Or is
Um,
it like, are they just talking about whatever, you know?
oh, that's a good question. I kind of skimmed it and I thought it was dev updates. So yeah, go ahead and chat while I look that up.
Because I'm gonna go on a drunken ramble at some point about fucking crafting systems. I swear to God, I'm just gonna go and start. I've been making a list of games that do it, and just like, you're all the same. Here's something different. Here's
Can you deviate from that?
you can. It's just it's more about getting across the idea of these things are not big scary systems. They can seem very scary, but it is inputs and outputs. It's just inputs, outputs, and levers on the in between. So depending on what you want to do, but there's actually a lot of different edges of the box, right? I'm not gonna go off on it right now. I'm gonna save this for later, but there's edges to the box of a crafting system. There's loads of different ways to do it. There's loads of different games that do crafting super differently, right? But there's a lot of games I feel like, again, we've fallen into like a pattern where now we go and say like, if you're gonna do crafting, it's got to be like this. Whereas like there's a bigger breadth there that is untapped for me right now. Like Factorio is still crafting to me. Like that's yeah, it's just it's but it's chain of production. I'm feeding it all in, and the method to get there is different, and I like that because it's like we're mixing and matching the components of how those resources move, and so how do we think about that as a one problem, but then use it to exactly expand your creativity? Like, can I get you outside of the box of thinking that it is just Minecraft? So it's just pattern and resource and everything else. But you know,
I,
go on.
I think what you said is actually it's very profound in because I think that's how you can approach a lot of things. And because if you can look at a game and identify what the building blocks really are and the inputs and outputs, then you can freely swap in new components and then you create new things. I think that is absolutely correct. How you can approach crafting or any game design. That's kind of how I do it as well.
The thing is though is that like I feel like I'm not a creative designer, right? Like if you actually sat me down and said, "Hey, make shotgun chest," is that what it was called?
Man, I was just looking at it.
I am too. It's on. I think it's on like the front page or something like that. Even
Shotgun King, yeah.
Shotgun King. Like I don't know if I could come up with that. I don't know if I could really think of that. But if you told me in my space like where to go and like how you want to move the player, I'm like okay, and I could pull from a lot of different places. But I feel like I do that now, where I fit the pieces together more so than actually thinking about what do I want this thing to be, right? And as an independent developer, how do you get stuck? Like, do you not just get stuck thinking about what is this mechanic going to be? How is this game going to go together? Like, what's the story I'm trying to tell here? Like, I have been dying and desperate to just even put a sprinkle of narrative. Just like, hey guys, we can use some story structure to figure out our maps and figure out our levels and just like a little. Everybody's like, no, no story. Nobody cares about story. Nobody reads story, and I'm like, fuck, this is stupid. Like narrative drives the industry right now. If you look at match and decorate, and people are paying to progress through story content, but like without getting how do you get out of these patterns when you're trying to make the games that you're trying to make? You know what I mean? To be as creative as possible, to then to sell that game on its creativity. Like I don't know. Like, is it just internal?
Yeah, that is a massive and golden question. If anybody can figure that out,
I just
they're
don't know if they're
probably on a
if
good
they're
path.
just techniques these days. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
if you're like looking at like, do you sit down? Does the game come to you first? Or do you sit down to make a game?
Yeah. Well, I can talk about just my approach. So I think there's levels to it. There's easy and hard. I think the easiest way for me is definitely to look at problems that you see in other games and then do your darndest to fix it. I think that's probably the easiest, and I think the more cynical you are, maybe as a gamer, the more you'll at least be motivated because obviously you're like, man, I'm gonna make the best crafting game ever. I don't know what it'll be, but I'm sick of what I see.
Yeah, I guess that's nice if you have a premise or something going into it, something to prove
Yeah,
or something.
yeah, exactly. And for me, like I can rattle off two real quick two problems. One was I love fishing games, but I hate fishing. So that was a yeah. I mean, so I just that one was
what is it
simple.
about it?
Oh yeah. So okay. So in a way, it's kind of like I'd compare it to like let's say JRPGs. I don't know. JRPG combat is very boring to me usually.
Yeah,
Just like
it's
we're
pretty
talking about,
boring to me too.
yeah, it's
Even
usually the
Final
same
Fantasy
thing.
back in the day, I was like, yo, I'm just okay, cool, potion
Uh,
here, great,
yeah,
awesome. All right, well, fuck, I didn't do anything. Sweet.
yeah, exactly. Unless it's a boss, but normally, yeah, you just attack and then cast your best spells. Not too much to it. So fishing games are the same way. As like I after a while the core balancing your tension of your line just gets really boring because you've mastered it, and you care about the collection of fish and stuff. So what I did with that game was I just ripped it out entirely, and then you're just kind of playing like what if. You're like, okay, now that I ripped that out, what do I need to do now? Well, I probably need to make the collection system more interesting. So you just kind of it's like improv. Like you have a mechanic. So I ripped out the fishing, and then you just keep going from there. It's like okay, and then, so you can create something out of that.
So yeah, so more not necessarily full on incremental, but like you move it to a post where you say like this feature is done, and now I'm gonna move over to something else, and like free up your brain for a little bit.
Yeah,
Does that
yeah,
and by the end of it, then you have some like holistic loop, like that makes sense for a game, right? So you're kind of building
yeah,
up the building blocks around everything else.
yeah, exactly. Because if you just rip out the fishing and then like keep everything else, then your game's gonna fail. The smallest change in a game design ripples to everything. So
Some
that's
people I know have core concepts of like this is the thing. This is the thing that I need to get right. And if this isn't right, nothing else matters, right? And
yeah,
to me in that thought process for you is like fishing is the thing that matters, right? So do you see it that way? Like do you work on the fishing mechanic until a point where you feel like it's fun and then move over to everything else or like what's that gradient there? Like, because I know some people who will just they'll just sit there and just do fishing for a year, and
that's true.
and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, so how's your game going? Well, I rebuilt it 28 times, and I think the 13th version was the best one or something. Like, what is it? Do you just pick that one idea, keep it pushing it forward? Do you explore the boxes of what fishing is before you even go on to the other things?
Yeah, what you said about somebody having a really strong vision. That's probably okay. When people come at me and say their vision, I almost always disagree with it. I'm sure the same goes for me when I pitch something, and I did. I told people my fishing game idea, and all my friends were like, "Well, that's not going to do well." um,
These people
but
really,
yeah,
really holding you up over here. Like, fuck.
that's right, calling them out on this podcast. But no, um, I did. It aligns with how businesses should approach their ideas as well. Because when you talk about business, not a game, not a art, businesses have to solve a problem.
Hmm.
If you're not solving a problem, then good luck. I mean, it's very hard. So I think if what you said about focusing really hard on a gameplay mechanic and polishing it, I feel like as long as it really solves a problem, then it's good and it's not risky. But I think if it's like, a Metroidvania but with a new story, that's not really solving a problem, and it's risky. But it can be done
Yeah.
because okay, of all the genres, Metroidvania, I swear, if you look at like a random Metroidvania on Steam, it has numbers, no matter like what quality it
Oh,
is.
seriously?
And
They just
yeah, I
do
don't know.
well.
people that buy Metroidvanias buy other ones, like from what I've seen.
God,
So that's an exception. That's an exception.
fucking nerds out here. Get off of whatever old console. You
Yeah.
stop reliving the past, people. There's new games. We have 3D. VR chat's a
I'll
thing. Come join us in the future.
yeah.
Jokes, big jokes, big jokes.
I'll give one more example though of like solving a problem, which is my second game I put out, Loot Loot Loop, which is a very similar in concept, which is I've played lots of Diablo and I always get really tired of the end game.
Hmm.
So I
Which
just
Diablo?
I've probably played two the most, but I think two and three kind of fell into the same category. I've
Okay.
heard D3 has gotten better lately, but
D
I
three
quit.
D3 consistently made a better play over the 7 years or whatever it's been out. Somehow, it's a good game. I love that game now. I really do.
Yep,
Big fan.
I believe that. I've heard good reviews about that, but I had quit before that point because I was, you're just farming and you're getting a legendary every 1 hour, but the legendary was the most fun part of the game.
Yeah.
So I made a game about speed run looting where you're constantly making loot decisions. And again, that to me that stemmed from a real problem I had, and I knew that the loot decision making was very interesting. So I
Hmm.
was like, what if I made a game about it? Only this.
In in general, this is interesting because you like D3. I love D3, and I bought Diablo 2, the resurrected edition or the remastered, whatever. I played it for all of about 20 minutes. I think I died to some of the first mobs in the first level, and I said, "This is dumb. I can't auto attack. I'm out." Like I was
Yeah.
so out. Like D3 holds my hand so crazily. I'm like, this is a Diablo game for babies.
Actually, sorry to interrupt because I know
No,
you had
do
a
it, do
thought,
it, do it.
but I'll give a super hot take because I've never seen anyone say this. But actually, my favorite was Diablo One.
Oh,
Diablo One is super clunky, but what I liked about it was that it felt like a real dungeon crawler. Because in all the other games, that's not a dungeon crawler. You're just like running around and like
yeah.
spinning and like blowing up the entire
Yeah.
screen. That's not like
It's like fast,
there's no
fast, fast, fast.
fantasy.
Tap,
Yeah,
tap, tap.
but the first time I played like Diablo, I was like, oh man, this game is like scary. It's like the butcher runs out and like just one shots you the first time you fight him. It was genuinely scary, and I believe D4 is kind of going back to that atmosphere. So and slower pace. So I like it. I like the
We'll
concept.
see. We'll see. Immortals, or I think it's called Immortals, just went into
Oh,
uh,
that's
its soft launch, or at least they
it.
put up the landing page for it now. So I'm excited. That's
Yeah,
gonna.
it's
I'm
out in like
ready for the
2 weeks.
beta,
Yeah.
and then we're gonna see all the
Anyways, I
microtransactions.
interrupted you.
No, you're fine. Don't worry about it. I ramble like an absolute mad hatter. So, and then I forget what I'm saying halfway through the ramble. Um,
That's what I was afraid of.
yeah. Welcome to Colorado. The the thing I was gonna say was like Diablo 3 is a place where it holds a special place in my heart. World of Warcraft holds a special place in my heart. Diablo up or GME up 9.6% today. Uh, so how do you stop yourself? So I know from going back to those as your pillars for design, right? So like in the end of the day, we are designers, implementers, engineers, artists, whoever. We always go back to some base lexicon of knowledge. Something that really like kind of stood out to us. Something is kind of like the pinnacle of something, right? And a lot of us, like especially on the design side, like we'll have like mechanics that were like that's the top notch, like that's the echelon. If I'm gonna build this mechanic, like that's the first one I'm gonna look at to see how are they doing it so that I can interpret that, do it differently, make it better. But how do I know like that this is the top dog? And that can become a problem because if a lot of people are using Diablo as their linchpin of this is the top of RPG dungeon crawler design, like how the loot drops and we have these nice spirals and how the game mechanics work and procedural generation in this sense. Like, if we're all using that, how are we making different games, or how do we build ourselves out of these patterns? Is it okay to just keep using Diablo as your your linchpin, or like over time do you have to go back and start adding on some of these newer games too, like Hades, like you were saying before, right? Like, I would say Hades takes a serious inspiration from a bunch of different dungeon crawler roguelike types, but one of them, I think, in terms of even the art style or structure of levels and stuff like that, is Diablo. And to me, it's like I look at it and it's like, this is pretty clear, like that this is where this kind of came from. And that might not be super clear to other people. Maybe I'm just like pattern matching recognition and just saying like, this is this, and it's not true, right? But um, yeah, how do we kind of stop ourselves from, getting into the stuck pattern of, I'm gonna make an RPG and I'm always just gonna go back to like that one mainstream game from 12 years ago, and not these other new things that have been going around, or do you even care?
Dude, first off, I want to say you asked some really profound and seriously good questions. It is really incredible. So to anybody who's watching, like even if me
Oh,
or
there's
him
nobody
give
watching.
terrible answers,
There's nobody watching. Nobody's watching.
yeah, exactly. So to the zero viewer out there, the ghost, even if we give terrible answers, man, these are great questions that you should be thinking
Yeah,
about.
ask
Every single
yourself
one.
these things. That's all I say. This is because these are the dumb things that I have to ask myself to try and get out of these, making sure that you're always correcting yourself. Like, how else do you become
Yep.
like, I don't know. There's a whole thing of how do you become the best designer that you can be, and I think
Yeah.
we have two different approaches to that. You are just doing it. You're just building the
Yeah.
things, and I'm over here
I
just.
never got your answer. Yeah, how do you? I don't know if you should, or you or me should answer this first, but like, yeah, what do you think is a top designer? We talked about this in the beginning, but I only gave my answer. How would you
Oh,
define that?
I think we were about this. We were the same. I think we were the
Oh, okay.
same. So yeah, I'll clear that up. Talk to me about how do you get yourself out of patterns to say like do you find
Okay.
yourself going back to the same games for the same reference when
Right.
building the same similar type of systems, or do you find yourself like trying like focusing and trying to explore on new things? Like,
Absolutely.
do you care about reference when you even sit down for an idea?
So it does depend on
I'm
how
gonna
much
get some
time you have.
coffee. Keep going. And
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely. I think it depends on how much time you have. If you are working for a company and they say, "All right, we need this monetization system," and you have 3 weeks to implement it, then you're just gonna rip something and go with that. So, but if you have time to explore, I'm just gonna say if you have infinite time to explore, and start with that spectrum. I think. Well, okay. I'll have to start from the fundamentals. I'll start with the fundamentals of creativity. The way I envision creativity is you have a vat of ideas and experiences that just live in your brain, just a bunch of green goo and whatnot. You can only come up with ideas from that vat. So if you're somebody that, let's say for 30 years all you did was watch reruns of
Nickelodeon.
yeah, yeah, or just one show.
Your brain, you're just getting slimed all
Yeah.
the
God,
time.
okay, that
Ideas.
wouldn't be bad. Yeah. If you are somebody that for 30 years only watched reruns of one SpongeBob episode, I mean, what kind of ideas could you possibly come up with? It would be literally only that. Like, that's obviously a very theoretical
No,
example.
I love that
But
analogy. No, I like that. I
yeah.
do.
So if you fill your mind, if you play a lot of games, let's start with a more common one. Lots of game devs play lots of games, and you will start being able to think, oh, what if I mixed and matched Diablo with GTA or something, or it just might pop into your mind. Is not usually creativity is usually not intentional. It just like happens
Do you
because your
cut
mind.
across you? But do you X of Y a lot, or like X statement? You ever seen that, like
Can you give?
the EA pattern of like it's this and this,
Oh,
right? So that like
um,
that used to be like I would always hear the EA people going and talking about that anytime they would do some sort of pitch meeting for features or for major new games or new titles. It was always like, "What's your X statement? What's it's something and something else with something
yeah,
else." Like, do you do that in your head too? Like it's Diablo plus GTA,
right.
or
I will say I used to,
mhm.
but I've undergone a creative transformation the past couple years, and
Nice.
I can go into more detail on that. First off, how often do you watch Donkey, the YouTuber?
Dude, all the time. I'm watching
Okay,
every Donkey video that comes out, minus
th-
whatever the hell that super like that Mario 64
yeah,
one was. The last
with May,
I
yeah,
was I don't know. I never had a Nintendo console, so I was like I
yeah.
don't know what this is about, but I guess I laugh. Like the
He put out a video with talking about game ideas. I forgot what it was called, but he did exactly what you're saying, where he just kept playing reviews and said, "Well, this is GTA mixed with
That's right.
whatever. This
Yeah.
is yeah," and that video is an example of this sort of I'll call it problem that we have in the creative space, which is people that kind of grew up on games really can only think in existing games. And this is a problem with movies as well. And you'll see people complain about this too. They're like, well, these people grew up on, I don't know, Star Wars. Maybe this is a bad idea, but they grew
No,
up on
you're
Star
right.
Wars, so they can only make derivative sorts of Star Wars stories or something. So I do think it's an issue. I think people in the older days were like, let's say you're in the '80s and you had to make a game. It's like,
You're
what are
just
you gonna pull from?
railing cocaine and just saying, "I'm gonna make a video game today."
Yeah, you are gonna pull from your life experiences or maybe tabletop games or something. So my answer to that is you got to fill your vat up
Yeah.
with lots of different ideas, not just from games, if you want to break the mold that other ones are doing.
No, I like that. Yeah, it's only your cauldron is only as big as what you know in there.
Exactly.
Somebody else had put this some other talk show or something. Had talked about a comedian saying that like jokes are like pulling. It's like fishing. It's like all of a sudden they just kind of come to you and you catch them and you write them down and you release them and they go back into the pool. But that only happens if the fish need to be the ideas, and the ideas, how bountiful your pool is only based off of how much knowledge you know, right? Or how much you
Yeah.
can interpret or turn into something else. I
And
feel
for
you on
comedians, yeah,
yeah.
comedians they just like to go out to real life all the time and they observe what's strange.
Yeah, they're living a crazy life by themselves, but it does go and tell you that it's nice. It's a great point to go and say, like, if you grew up on Star Wars and all you watched was sci-fi, you're probably gonna want to make your sci-fi in line with that. Same way if you're a Trekkie versus, or and you like Battlestar Galactica and you hate, Star Wars. If you're gonna make sci-fi, you're probably gonna go more serious, right, with it.
Yep.
But I think that's our natural jumps and our natural inclination is to do that.
It is.
It's like
Nothing wrong with
weird
that.
because getting into like the hiring side of the industry, like nobody cares about like whether or not you like Star Trek or Battlestar Galactica or anything like that, but it does matter where your ideas are getting pulled from, and where you've worked in the past is a big indicator of where you can work in the future, right?
That's
So
interesting.
if you've worked on a combat design system, well, you can theoretically go work on another combat design system, but moving from mobile to like AAA is like a very hard thing to do. Now it's easier these days because a lot of AAA want mobile designers because they want to be able to do all these live operations things. Like they see the billions and they want to
Yeah.
capitalize on it, so they're like, all right, well, we got to snake some ideas, but like not many people are going to give you a shot in a position that you have no background or experience in or no verifiable thing on too. So if you've never
Correct.
worked on building character abilities, then you're probably not going to get that character creator job at Riot. You know what I mean? So
Damn, man, you're right. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy or whatever, where like you just end up hiring people that can only do that thing, and you wind up that way.
yeah,
Wow, that's interesting.
so it's like I don't. This gets into the whole thing of back to your other question of where do you think a great designer is, or like what do you think a good designer is? And I always say that it's the person who can find me the answer. Um,
Yeah,
I don't care how you get to the answer, but somebody who can find me something. Like I give you a problem,
I
you
agree.
go off and you take it and you run with it and you try to find some different things. But give me good solves that make sense within our time budget. Like designers are the inflection point between every single discipline. Art, animation, we are constantly trying to convey some form of vision that is holistic across all of those groups. We're writing the specs to be able to design against those things and making sure everybody knows like this is what we're doing here. This is why we're doing it. This is why it's going to impact the player. This is their goals. This is our goals. How are we going to be successful here? And you kind of have to be the cheerleader to champion it down the line. Like as the feature owner and everything like that, like you have to get people excited about it. And when those problems come up, you got to solve those problems as quickly as possible while always taking into account like what are the other people around you saying? Like what are their tool sets? Um what are their also if you really get into it and you start getting into like the interpersonal stuff, like what are the other people's strengths? Right? What are their strengths within your team? Not just like don't just look at them as like an artist or an engineer. It's like that person has a name, right? So like what do they like to do on the weekends? Do they like to do loot and dare? Awesome. Maybe they're great at prototyping. Hey, do they have any tools that they have? Like is there try to find something that these people are good at as well and kind of like leverage those things in to like make the best thing possible. But those are the best designers to me.
Yeah,
Is it's not necessarily the people who come up with the solution or have the best idea in the room. It's the people who can facilitate better conversation and keep a team rallied around a kind of like concrete idea and be able to solve those problems in the fly with grace. Dude,
that's interesting.
the
Is
amount
is,
of
is that
times I didn't do that is unbelievable. I would just get angry. I'd be angry that people hadn't like accomplished the thing. I'm like, I don't. It doesn't look like the spec. It doesn't look like this, and I would just be like, I would pout and I would be sad, like, because then I would see it as like a reflection on me too, as like a younger developer. I'd be like, oh, this feature's not up to spec because I didn't push the team to get it to the thing, and then you realize you're like, oh, you're 24. These people are like 33, and they've all been making games for a lot longer than you, and you're like shouting at them.
is that really the role of a game designer though? Isn't that more of a producer's job to get everything on track?
It's not about getting things on track. It's about keeping the ball rolling and making sure that the concrete vision is always there. So like when you're trying to
Okay.
it's about communicating design rather than and communicating intent, right? Like what's our intentions? Like this person's going to go and design your character, right? Well, like talk to the concept artist, right? Like yeah, they might have ideas and they might have ideas based off it's high fantasy, it's sci-fi, it's but if you don't drill down that funnel a little bit more, you're not you can give them the power to like get you something that's cool, but like if you can give them it's a little bit more of a box, you can get a lot more creativity out of certain out of types of people, I find.
I agree. Yeah.
I call it like the sandbox, right? Like everybody's working within their sandbox, but the sandbox can be as big as the desert. And if you don't know where you can build your sandcastle and it's across the whole desert and you don't have these like little constraints, like small constraints sometimes are great. Like finding where you want to really imply constraint and also kind of dictate like direction a little bit more versus allowing people to kind of open up and find their path. Like sometimes you'll just have things where you're like, no, we have to comp against this. This is the direction. This is the game that we're doing. We're not innovating here. We're trying to go one to one. I need you to look at this game and really and do it. But you can't expect people to look at it, and you can't expect them to interpret your vision of what is happening on a game screen as well. So like taking little videos like on Loom and just being like, pointing things out and just saying, hey, like, check out, see how they do this, see how they do this, like, this is nice because it does the blah 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 blah. And you give that framework to these people where they can just take that in the same way that we're talking about game reference, and you're just like scooping your little pieces and then putting it in front of them and saying, here's a packet, you're building this thing, here's how the other companies do that thing, this is where I think we should be, this is our goals, this is how I want the user to feel about this character, go at it. And if you can do that and then allow them to take that reference and build something that's their own and have that autonomy to build that thing that's their own, at least you're trying to mold their vision of what that thing is into your vision of that thing. That's how you get, if you can keep doing that as a designer and kind of not micromanage, it's not micromanaging, it's just giving people the context to be able to make the decision, but it brings everybody around you too, because if they can follow your train of thought of like how you got from point A to where we are now, like that's your job. We think about it, we write it down, we think about loads of different versions of it, and then I present you the best version. So now you might not agree that that's the best version. I've had that happen before. Engineers are just like, this is a bad, I don't like this feature, I don't like what we're doing here, this is dumb.
Damn.
And you have to then basically sit them down and just be like, look, A, B, C, D, how do you want to fill in between, and give them the counter to say, like, what do you want this to be yourself? Like, if you don't like this, then what should it be? And have that discussion.
I like what you said. I like what you said about having everyone kind of also mimic your vision, because I think when a game has its design like run throughout its entire DNA, from the art to the code and whatnot, like people can feel that. People can feel when it's also inconsistent, and that's when the design DNA like had issues, like you said.
It's like when you're not in the room, you are in the room, because you've
Yeah.
given them the information along the way while they're building the things, so that they know why they're doing it. And it's important for everybody to understand, why are we doing this thing right now? Why are we building it this way? And why should I be excited about that? Like, rally your people around the idea too. Like, if if you have a team, if you if you can get to those levels, But like, it's, I don't know, have you ever had to hire contractors for any of your stuff? Like, even short term and things like that? How do you go about, because you seem to, the way I talked about that, like, I have diagrams of these things we can show off later on, but how do you go and talk to these people to go and say, this is the game I've been working on for 2 years, you're just jumping in for 8 weeks or whatever, and I need you to do great work and be exactly the thing I need? How do you one, find those people, but two, like, even communicate that in your own way?
Yeah, I've worked with done contract game designer, or we've hired a game designer or a game design consultant, and I guess, I don't know, there was never any sense of overstepping the bounds. He was pretty much just hired to like look at our game and improve it, and he just shot a bunch of ideas at us, and then it was up to us to implement them. We could be like, you know what, we don't want this because it changes our vision too much.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because he was a game design consultant. And,
yeah, when you're hiring like a consultant, or then you kind of do want them to give you that outside perspective, don't you?
So I can't say I've worked with a contractor
was
needed to
his
adhere to
opinion
it.
bullshit? Did you agree with his Did you agree with his stuff? Is there
I
anything
learned
that you took? Because I could see sometimes where, somebody comes in and they're just like, dude, it's all shit. It's all sucks. Like, you gotta fucking rip it all away. You gotta throw it all out. Dude, nobody's gonna like any of this. I've had that happen plenty of times, and I'm like, nope, you are wrong. like, this obviously isn't gonna work. Thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah. I have never worked with a game design consultant before that one, and I was joking that was going to be the case, that he was going to be like, "No, this game is trash. Here, pay me $5,000 or whatever." But I learned a lot from him. I learned quite a bit, and that's pretty much almost all my mobile game knowledge is due to interacting with that person in terms of the finances and industry, CPI, and all that. So it was a really good experience, and he he proved his worth. We'll just say that.
Nice. Yeah, you're
But
gonna have to
no, I
have to share some of that knowledge with us at some point, because yeah, I definitely the biggest
yeah,
thing these days like the is it even worth building your game? And you need to know that kind of before you do it. Sometimes on my side and the more commercial side, you
yes,
need to know is it actually financially viable to even build that product at any scale before you've even written a line of code. And doing that is like
completely
knowing
agree.
the numbers, knowing your market, blah blah blah. But on your side, when you're doing these more experimental things, nah, I'll take that back. Not experimental. These more interesting concepts. These more games, more like real games. These things that we should hold as a standard of like in the gradient. These are games. How do you how do you go and solve around that? Like, do you care about that? Like, I guess this gets into I've never asked you ever. We're at time. You got 5 minutes to answer this. But
Got it.
what is success to you within this project that you've been making now for this amount of time, right? Like, success is so different to everybody, but on my side, it's very simple. People just look at the metrics. They just want to see numbers. So what really does success look for you? Because you have bigger aspirations than just the cash money dollars.
Yeah. So actually, you're kind of right. I mean, I would call them. They were initially experimental games. I'll definitely say that. I was shotgunning out prototypes. I was like, none of these are gonna work. They're way too crazy. And then almost all of them landed. So I was surprised. I
Just a
was
god.
surprised.
Just don't even light flex. Just a little light flex.
No, but yeah, I so definitely the short term answer is money does matter
Okay.
for sure. Because I need money and I do need and if you're okay,
But if
to
it
some of the
pays
people that are
itself, like if it doesn't make money first year, like
right,
is that gonna be sad to you? Because most games don't make money their first year. Second year, they do well or can do well, but it's
yeah,
not always an instant return.
right. So yeah, that question for de- depends on how much money anybody has,
Hmm.
and I could use some money right now. So yeah, it would make me sad if it took me a while to make money. So yeah, to answer the question, and this is kind of a comment to a lot of people out there that are like, "Man, do it for the art," or like, "You should make these games free and stuff." It's like,
Do you live off of ramen,
I,
like
yeah,
and broth? Yeah, because
yeah.
that's what you're gonna be doing.
I
Best of
will
luck.
quickly address that and say if you're making games not for money, then you're a hobbyist by definition. And if you're making games with for money or to make a profit, then you can start a studio. Then you can have other people. Then you can kick out bigger and better games.
Hmm.
This is simply a fact, unless you have savings, like extreme savings.
That's
But
so
yes,
interesting. So are hobbyists actually game designers? Like, are these people? Are they real?
I will say they are. I mean, hey man, if I can win the lottery and just make games for free, I'll still be a game designer. I'll call
Sure.
it that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I just say it's if
Um.
you release something. Like if you built it and released it.
Yeah.
But that's like
Yeah.
my place. It's like you still have to release the thing. You can't
Yeah.
just make prototypes for forever and never
I'll
actually
say
put
that.
something out.
Yeah. And then to just put a bow on it. Yeah. I mean, your goal doesn't always have to be money, and you can send out messages and change the world, and those are all beyond what most games are shooting for.
Well, you're here to hear first, folks. Make games, change the world. Make
There you go.
games,
That's the
change the
equation.
world. Make games, change the world. All right. Thank you, Calvin.
Yeah,
Appreciate
it's
it,
been good.
buddy.